Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 8th of March 2022 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on your screen. Timestamp for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. Today, that is 8th of March 2022, we are celebrating the International Women's Day. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is Gender Equality Today for Sustainable Tomorrow. Now, if you decode this particular theme, it basically means that if you want to promote sustainable development in future, then today we would have to promote gender equality. Only when we are able to promote equality between men and women, we can have sustainable development in future. Now, for example, the countries across the world are presently trying to meet the sustainable development goals. Now, our ability to meet each of these sustainable development goals is in turn dependent upon our ability to promote gender empowerment. Only when we are able to promote equality between men and women in terms of political equality, the economic equality, social equality, etc., we would be able to meet the sustainable development goals and promote sustainable development in future. Accordingly, the first article for today's analysis is Reaping the Potential of Female Labor Force, which appears on page number 7. This article shall be important from the perspective of both GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Now, this particular article highlights that the female labor force participation rate in case of India has continuously been declining since 1990s. So this particular decline in the female labor force participation rate is in turn going against our goals of promoting inclusive growth and development. Accordingly, this particular article here highlights various strategies that must be adopted in order to increase the female labor force participation rate in India. So as far as the UPSC Prelims and Mains examination is concerned, the various aspects that become important are, first and foremost, the concept of the labor force participation rate, which becomes important from the perspective of the prelims examination. And as far as the mains examination is concerned, one should understand the reasons for the decline in the female labor force participation rate, the various initiatives which the government has taken to enhance the female labor force participation rate, and what more needs to be done. And as you can see in the previous year mains, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various aspects of women empowerment. Like in mains 2019, we had a question as to how empowering of women will help us control the population growth rate. Similarly, once again in mains 2019, we had a question as to what are the challenges faced by women against time and space. And in mains 2014, we had a question as to what are the various factors that are driving the feminization of Indian agriculture. That is basically what are the factors which are forcing the women to take up the agriculture. So repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various aspects of women empowerment. So based upon the analysis of our article, you should be in a position to attempt these two prelims questions for practice, and you should also be in a position to write an answer to these two mains question for practice. The question for practice here is, economic empowerment of women is a key to achieve sustainable development goals. In the light of this statement, analyze the reasons for the decline in the female labor force participation rate in the Indian economy. The second practice question is, enumerate various initiatives taken by the government to increase the female labor force participation rate. Also discuss some strategies that are needed to reap the demographic potential of women in India. So, keeping in mind the requirement of the UPSC prelims as well as the mains examination, let us understand various aspects related to women empowerment, particularly with respect to increasing the female labor force participation rate. So here we'll understand the concept of the labor force participation rate, the present status, the reasons for decline, what initiatives the government has taken, and what strategies must be adopted. So let's first understand as to what do you actually mean by labor force. See, labor force of a particular country includes all those people who are presently employed or presently working, plus all those people who are presently searching for jobs. So all those people who are presently employed and all those people who are presently searching for jobs, these people, they are considered to be part of the labor force in a particular country. Please do understand here that the labor force of a particular country does not include those people who may not be searching for work right now. Now, for example, most of you who are preparing for the UPSC examination, you are right now not searching for work. Rather, you are preparing for the examination. So even though you may have completed your graduation, you are not searching for a job. So in a way, you will not be considered to be part of the labor force of the Indian economy. However, even some people among you must have completed your graduation. Some among you may be presently working. Since you are presently working, you will be considered to be part of the labor force. So the labor force in a particular country includes only those people who are presently working and the people who are searching for jobs. If people are not searching for jobs, then they will not be considered to be part of the labor force. So people who are not searching for jobs basically include the people who are presently pursuing their higher education, people who may be preparing for the examination, the homemakers in a particular country, and so on. So the labor force participation rate basically tells us a percentage of the labor force in a particular country. See, when we normally say percentage, so percentage of what? So here, the labor force participation rate can be considered as the percentage of the total population in a particular country, which is part of the labor force, or the percentage of the working age population, which is part of the labor force. So labor force participation rate can either be calculated as the labor force divided by total population in a country, or the labor force divided by the total working age population, that is basically the people in the age group of 15 to 59 years. So that is how we calculate the labor force participation rate. So let us look at the present status of the labor force participation rate, particularly with respect to the second aspect, that is the labor force divided by the working age population, that is the people in the age group 15 to 59 years. Now this present status of the labor force participation rate, I am discussing this from the Economic Survey 2018-19. So this particular figure here shows as to how the labor force participation rate in India has been since 1990s. Particularly focus on the extreme left, that is the labor force participation rate in the rural India for the females. As you can see, in 1990s, the labor force participation rate of the females was 52%. It has now got reduced to 26% in the year 2017-18. As far as the urban labor force participation rate is concerned, it was 25% in the year 1990s, and now it has dropped down to 22.3. So overall, if you look at the female labor force participation rate of the Indian economy, it was somewhere around 45.2% in 1990s. And as you can see here, from 45.2, it has got reduced to 25.3. So what does this basically mean? This basically means that only 25% of the females in the age group 15 to 59, only 25% of the females in this particular age group are either employed or they may be looking out for work. And this is considered to be much lower. So as you can see here, the total labor force participation rate of the Indian economy in the year 2017-18, this was approximately around 50%, which means that almost around 50% of the people in the age group 15 to 59, they were either working or looking out for work. But the male labor force participation rate was much higher at 75%. But the female labor force participation rate is lower at 25%. And please look at the gap between the labor force participation rate for males and females. The gap is very, very huge. According to the World Economic Forum, if the female labor force participation rate of the Indian economy increases to match up to the male labor force participation rate, that is, if the female labor force participation rate increases from 25% to 75%, then the overall GDP size of India can increase by almost around 27%. So you can imagine the amount of the economic benefits which we can reap if we are able to increase the female labor force participation rate of the Indian economy. So increase in the female labor force participation rate will not only lead to economic benefits, but it can also lead to the social benefits. It can also lead to political benefits and so on. Now, for example, if you look at the female labor force participation rate in case of Bangladesh, it is much higher at 38%. So the higher female labor force participation rate in case of Bangladesh has in turn led to women empowerment, and this is in turn evident in the positive outcomes in the field of education, in the field of health, in the field of nutrition and so on. So coming to the reasons for the decline in the female labor force participation rate in the Indian economy. So broadly, these reasons can be categorized into two types, that is the supply side factors and the demand side factors. When we say supply side factors, it basically means that less number of women are now entering into the labor force. So supply of labor into labor force has got reduced. So why is that? First and foremost, more number of women are now enrolling in the higher education. So as more number of women are enrolling in the higher education, it basically means that these women are now not looking out for work. That is why one reason as to why the female labor force participation rate has reduced is because of higher enrollment of women in the higher education. Now, particularly with respect to enrollment in the education, you can have a look at this particular graph, which I have taken it from this year's economic survey, that is economic survey 21-22. So if you want to find out the enrollment of the students in the education, we can have a look at two important parameters, that is the gross enrollment ratio and the net enrollment ratio. The gross enrollment ratio is a ratio of children enrolled in a particular class, regardless of the age, to the eligible population in the age group for that particular class. Now, for example, let's say you want to calculate the gross enrollment ratio in the primary school, that is for the age group 6 to 10 years. So the formula that we use is the number of children enrolled in the primary schools, regardless of the age, divided by the number of children in the age group of 6 to 10 years. So in the numerator, we take into account all the children enrolled in the primary schools irrespective of their age. So this may include even the underage children also or the overage children also. So as far as the primary school is concerned, it may include some students who may be enrolled below the age of 6, or there may be certain students who may be enrolled after the age of 10 years. So the gross enrollment ratio takes into account all the children irrespective of the age enrolled in the schools divided by the number of children in a particular age group. So if you can see here, if the gross enrollment ratio is more than 100, what does this mean? This basically means that the numerator is more than the denominator. And why will the numerator be more than the denominator? The numerator will be more than the denominator if more number of underage children or the overage children are enrolled in the school. And this is predominantly in case of India on account of more enrollment of the overage children in the schools. So if someone has missed out schooling, and let's say a particular person, especially from say primary school, is presently say 12 years old, and such a student has now got enrolled in the primary school, so the gross enrollment ratio would obviously increase. The net enrollment ratio is calculated as the ratio of children enrolled in a particular class to the eligible population in the age group to the particular class. So here, while calculating the net enrollment ratio, we take into account only the children in the specific age group. So if you want to calculate the net enrollment ratio for the primary school, in the numerator, we would take into account only those children who are in the age group 6 to 10 years. Whereas in order to calculate the gross enrollment ratio in the numerator, you would take into account all the children irrespective of the age enrolled at a particular level. That level could be primary level, upper primary level, secondary level, or the higher education. So this particular graph here shows the gross enrollment ratio for boys and girls at different levels of schooling. So here, please concentrate on the rightmost column. So here, as you can see, in case of the primary level, the gross enrollment ratio for the girls is higher than the gross enrollment ratio for the boys. For girls it is 104, whereas for boys it is 102. We have a similar story even for the gross enrollment ratio at the upper primary level, where the gross enrollment ratio for girls is 90, whereas for boys it is 89. Similarly, at the secondary level, the gross enrollment ratio for girls and boys is almost same at 78. So, at different levels of schooling, that is primary level, upper primary level, and at secondary level, either the overall gross enrollment ratio of girls is more than the boys, or it is same as boys, that is when it comes to the secondary level. Now, what is also equally interesting is the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education. Now, as you can see here, in the year 2019-20, the gross enrollment ratio for the females was around 27.3, whereas for males it was 26.9. So the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education, it is higher for females in comparison to the males. Now this clearly shows that now more number of women are getting enrolled in the higher education. So this higher enrollment of women in the higher education has in turn led to the decline in the female labor force participation rate. The second reason is, in the last 5 to 10 years, there has been increase in the income levels of the households, and because of the increase in the income levels, less number of women are now taking up the employment. So usually women, especially in the rural areas, take up the employment in order to supplement the family income. And as highlighted with the economic survey, in the last 10 years, there has been increase in the income levels of the households in the rural India, and because of which now less number of women are taking up employment in the rural India. The third reason is obviously the cultural factors, that is the social constraints and patriarchal norms, which in turn prevent the women from entering the labor force. As far as the demand side factors are concerned, demand side factors basically means that women wants to take up the jobs. They want to enter the labor force. But we have a problem from this particular side. That is, we are not being able to create employment opportunities for the women. So when it comes to supply side factors, it basically means that less number of women are entering into the labor force because of the constraints on the supply side. When we look at the demand side, it basically means that we're not able to create sufficient employment opportunities for the women. One of the most important reasons is with respect to the flawed structural transformation. See, earlier, a large number of women used to get employed in the agriculture. And we know that over a period of time, the share of the agriculture sector has been declining. Now, this particular decline in the agriculture sector has not been accompanied by creation of jobs in other sectors. More importantly, we have not been able to create more of jobs in the manufacturing sector, particularly for the women. So this is the first and most important reason. So when you look at the creation of jobs in India, first and foremost, we are creating very few amount of jobs. For example, if you look at the employment elasticity of the Indian economy, it is hardly like 0.1. So 1% increase in our GDP leads to just 0.1% increase in the job creation. So first problem is we are creating less of jobs. And the second problem is we are creating few jobs which can cater to the needs of the women. So that's the most important reason. The second is, if you look at most of the women, they are basically employed in labor intensive industries. Particularly they are employed in labor intensive industries such as textile, leather, etc. And there has been a continuous decline in these labor intensive industries, which in turn has led to contraction in the employment opportunities for the women. And last and most important is there is a significant wage gap between males and females, which in turn has led to less number of women taking up the jobs. So in order to increase the female labor force participation rate, the government has undoubtedly taken a number of steps. For example, the Parliament has passed the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013. Secondly, we have launched a Mahila Shakti Kendra scheme to empower the rural women through the community participation. We are trying to promote entrepreneurship among the females through various schemes such as the Stand Up India, Startup India, Mudra scheme, and so on. Then we have launched the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh in order to provide the macro credit facilities to the women in order to take up the self-employment opportunities. Then we have the Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program, under which we are giving subsidies to the women for setting up projects in both rural and urban India. And lastly, we have the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission, whose main focus is to organize the women into self-help groups. So what more needs to be done in order to reap the demographic potential of women? First and foremost, this particular article highlights that if the government is able to focus on the education and health, that is, if the government is spending more amount of money on both education and health, this will have dual benefits. Dual benefit is, on one hand, we would be able to improve the health and education outcomes, while on the other hand, we can create almost around 69 million jobs by the end of 2030. Now, why is this important? Because if you look at the women, more number of women are actually employed in the field of education and health. So, by investing more amount of money on education and health, we will not only be able to improve the education and health outcomes, but at the same time, we would also be able to create more of jobs which are specific to women. The second important aspect is with respect to gig economy. I hope all of you know the basics of gig economy. The gig economy is basically that part of economy in which the organizations employ contractual, non-permanent employees instead of hiring the permanent employees. When it comes to gig economy, the gig workers range from the highly paid white-collared workers to the underwage or low-paid blue-collared workers. According to some of the estimates, right now, more than 10 million people are employed as gig workers. And it is said that in the next 2 to 3 years, the number of gig workers may actually double or triple. Now, the gig economy has a potential to create jobs for the women because the women as such have to manage both unpaid care work at home, that is, they are required to take care of the household duties, and they are also required to do a paid work outside the household. Now, gig economy can actually create more jobs for the women because the gig economy gives the necessary flexibility to the women to work according to their own convenience. So, gig economy has a flexibility in terms of at what time the women can work, how many hours they can work. So that kind of flexibility has a potential to create more jobs for the women. But the problem here is, as far as the gig economy is concerned, if women have to participate in the gig economy, women should have access to internet and smartphones. But as highlighted in this particular article, only 25% of the women in case of India own the smartphones. So the problem is, women will not be able to have access to gig economy because they do not have access to internet. They do not have access to smartphones. So that's the biggest challenge. The second challenge is with that respect to fact that the workers working in the gig economy do not have access to social security benefits. The men and women do not get equal pay. So these constraints and challenges would have to be addressed in order to ensure that we are able to create productive employment opportunities for the women. For example, I hope most of you must have heard about the Social Security Code 2020. Now, the Social Security Code 2020 has for the first time recognized the gig workers. So, for the first time, we have incorporated the gig workers into the labor law in India. And this Social Security Code in turn seeks to provide social security benefits to the gig workers. So, the government needs to ensure that the women who are becoming part of the gig economy have access to these social security benefits by effectively implementing the Social Security Code 2020. We must also ensure that there is an equal pay for men and women. The next aspect is with respect to feminization of Indian agriculture. According to the Agriculture Census 2011, right now 30% of the farmers are actually females. So, in the last 10 years, more number of females are now taking up agriculture, which is referred to as feminization of Indian agriculture. What are the reasons for the growing feminization? First one is obviously poverty, which is in turn forcing up women to work in agriculture as agriculture laborers or farmers. The second problem is wage gap. So you must be knowing that the females are paid less wages in comparison to males. So since the females demand for less wages, the people in rural India employ more of females to work on the agricultural fields. And next aspect is the urban migration of males, which has in turn forced the women to take up the agriculture. So these are some major drivers. But the growing feminization of Indian agriculture poses a number of challenges before the women. For example, the women do not have the ownership in their name. Second, the land holdings are highly fragmented. So because of the fragmented land holding, the overall productivity or efficiency of the agriculture land is quite lower. There is lack of availability of gender-friendly tools to practice agriculture. So these are some challenges. So we need to address these challenges so that the women who are now practicing agriculture can earn better income and also encourage more women to take up the agriculture. Now, what strategies can be adopted in order to address the challenges related to the feminization of Indian agriculture? Some of these challenges include the digitization of land records, ensuring the land ownership in the name of females. Then to solve the problem of fragmented land holdings, we can start organizing the women farmers into the farmer producer organizations. Similarly, we can design gender friendly tools in order to promote agricultural mechanization. For example, presently we are implementing the submission on agricultural mechanization in order to promote mechanization. So we can have a specific component in order to promote gender friendly tools as part of this particular scheme. So as you can see, there are multiple strategies which can be adopted in order to improve the female labor force participation rate of the Indian economy. Now, based upon our discussion of this particular article, you should be in a position to attempt these two prelims questions for the practice. So please do let us know the answer in the comment section given below, and also try to write answers to these two mains questions for practice. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 1. The article is titled as Rupee sinks to a record low as the oil prices spike. On account of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the prices of Brent crude has increased to an all-time high of $125 per barrel. Since India imports more than 80% of its crude oil requirements, the value of rupee has depreciated to a lifetime low of 76.97. Now, how does this particular article becomes important as far as your prelims examination is concerned? As you can see, in prelims 2019 and prelims 2020, we had questions related to various aspects of the decline in the value of Indian rupee, that is the rupee depreciation. For example, in prelims 2019, there was a question which required you to identify as to what factors can reduce the risk of the currency crisis in India. And in prelims 2020, we had this question as to which of these steps are not likely to be taken either by the government or the RBI to stop the rupee depreciation. So based upon the nature of questions asked in the previous year prelims, one should be aware about various aspects of the rupee depreciation. That is, what exactly is rupee depreciation? How is rupee depreciation different from the rupee appreciation? What factors contribute to the rupee depreciation? How the rupee depreciation would have an impact on the economy? And what steps are likely to be taken either by the government or by the RBI in order to stop the decline in the value of the Indian currency? So what we would do here is this particular topic, that is the rupee depreciation. We will discuss this entire topic in terms of certain prelims based questions. So I will be discussing 3 prelims based questions, wherein one prelims based question is with respect to the factors that lead to the rupee depreciation. One question is with respect to the effects of the rupee depreciation on the Indian economy. And one question is with respect to what steps are likely to be taken in order to counter the rupee depreciation. So let's first understand some of the important aspects of the rupee depreciation. See, the value of rupee can change from $1 is equal to 60 to $1 is equal to 70. So this particular change in the exchange rate of the Indian currency can be considered as rupee depreciation. The question is, why do we call it as rupee depreciation? Now here, as you can see, earlier to get $1, you are required to pay rupees 60. Now to get the same $1, you are required to pay rupees 70. That is, you are required to pay 10 rupees more to get the same $1, right? So that is why it is referred to as rupee depreciation. The question is, why does the rupee value depreciate? Now, for example, let's take the case of an apple. one apple was costing you rupees 10 yesterday, and same apple now is costing you rupees 20. So as you can see, the cost of apple has increased, whereas the purchasing power of the Indian currency has got reduced. Now, why does this cost of apple increase? The cost of apple would increase when the demand for apple increases, or say the supply of apple reduce. Now extend the same logic to that of dollar. Now as you can see, $1 was costing us 60 rupees yesterday. Now $1 is costing us 10 rupees more, that is rupees 70, which means that the dollar value has appreciated or increased. Now why would the dollar value appreciate? This is because the demand for dollar could increase, or say the supply of dollar in the economy reduces. So overall, because the demand for dollar has increased, the supply of dollar reduced, the value of dollar vis-a-vis Indian currency, this dollar value would increase. And this dollar value increases predominantly because whenever we have a shortage of dollars. So when the dollar value increases, the value of rupee vis-a-vis dollar reduces. Now question is, why will the demand for dollar in the economy increase, or why will the supply reduce? Now this could be on account of multiple factors. For example, if you are importing more of goods and services from other countries, the demand for dollar will increase. Or say the cost of import increases. Even in that case also, the rupee value could depreciate. So recently, as you can see, the value of the crude oil has increased. So the cost at which we are importing the crude oil has increased, and that is why the rupee value has also got depreciated. Now as far as the supply of dollar, this reduces because of decrease in exports, decrease in FDI or FPI, decrease in remittances into India, and so on. So what happens in case of rupee depreciation is, the overall dollar outflow from the Indian economy would be more than the dollar inflows, which in turn creates shortage of dollars. Shortage of dollars leads to increase in the value of dollar, and hence the rupee value would depreciate. Now how does it impact the Indian economy? First and foremost, as you can see here, it is being said that the rupee depreciation would benefit the exporters and would adversely affect the importers. Why? Now, for example, let's say you as an exporter, you are exporting a commodity worth $1. So when you are converting this $1 into Indian rupee, you are getting rupees 60. But now when you export the same commodity, you would get the $1. But when you exchange this $1 into Indian rupee, you are getting 10 rupees more. So you as an exporter, you would gain more by exporting. That is why you would try to export as many goods and services to other countries in order to gain more profits. Whereas if you look at it from the importer perspective, let's say to import a commodity you are paying $1 earlier, which means to get this $1 you are paying 60. Now to import the same commodity worth $1, you are paying rupees 10 more. That is, you are paying rupees 17 now, which means now for you the imports have become costly. So whenever the rupee value depreciates, exports from India could increase. That is, in a way the exports become more competitive, whereas the imports could become costly. Now let's understand as to what would happen as far as Indian economy is concerned in the long run. That is when the rupee value depreciates. Now you must understand that India is majorly a importing country. That is, our imports are much higher than our exports. Now as I said, whenever the rupee value depreciates, exports from India would increase, which means, can I say here that there will be more dollar inflows into India because of increase in exports, right? On similar lines, when it comes to imports, my imports have become costly. And especially if you look at India, we import huge amount of crude oil, gold, and so on. So because my imports have become costly, the dollar outflow from the Indian economy would be higher. So as you can see, there are two things which are happening here. Because of imports becoming costly, more amount of dollar is going out of country, and because my exports have increased, more amount of dollar is coming into the country. Now, what do you think would be the net effect of these two things? Will the dollar supply in the Indian economy increase or decrease? What do you think about it? Now, you must understand that our imports are much higher than our exports, which clearly means that whenever the rupee value depreciate, more amount of dollar would go out of India than the amount of dollar coming into India. So here, in the long run, what happens is the outflow of dollars due to costly imports, this will be much higher than the dollar inflows due to increase in exports. Now, just for the sake of example, let's say because the rupee value has depreciated, my exports have increased by, for example, $10 billion. But at the same time, you must understand that the imports have become costly. So here, my cost of imports may have risen by, say, $25 billion. So what is the net effect here? The net effect is minus $15 billion as far as the Indian economy is concerned. So we will have further shortage of dollars. And since we'll have further shortage of dollars, once again, the rupee value will depreciate. So in the long run, please do understand that as the rupee value undergoes depreciation, the imports into India will become costly, whereas exports would increase, and the net effect would be a further depreciation in the value of the Indian currency. Now let us take up these three prelims questions for practice. The first question is, which among the following reasons could possibly lead to the rupee depreciation in India? First one is decline in exports. Second one is increase in imports, adoption of Fed tapering in US, and increase in the rate of inflation within India. We know for sure that the first two options are correct. When it comes to the third option, adoption of Fed tapering in US. So whenever the US Fed Bank adopts a Fed tapering, the rate of interest in the US economy are likely to increase in future. So this future increase in rate of interest in turn leads to higher dollar outflows from the Indian economy, and hence the adoption of Fed tapering would obviously lead to the rupee depreciation. If you want to understand about the adoption of Fed tapering in US and how it is likely to affect the Indian economy, I have already discussed this in much greater detail in the economic survey video. You can go through that particular video. The next option is increase in the rate of inflation within India. Now we know that inflation may take place because of increase in demand or shortage of supply of certain critical goods. Now let's understand from the perspective of demand. Now let's say there is increase in demand for certain goods and services within the Indian economy. So increase in demand for goods and services within the Indian economy would lead to more of imports into India from other countries. So increase in imports would obviously lead to the rupee depreciation. Similarly, the inflation may take place because of supply side bottlenecks. For example, let's say because of failure of monsoons, suddenly there is a decline in the production of edible oils, or for that matter, there is a decline in the production of pulses. So what we would do in this particular case is, in order to increase the supply of these agricultural commodities, we will import these agricultural commodities into the Indian economy. So once again, the imports are likely to increase. So whenever there is an inflation within India, either the demand will increase or the supply is lower. So when the demand increases, we'll import more from other countries. When the supply of certain essential goods is lower, and which leads to inflation, we'll try to increase the supply by importing these goods from other countries. So once again, imports will increase, and hence it will lead to rupee depreciation. So the right answer to this particular question is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now coming to second question. The question is, which among the following can be considered as effects of rupee depreciation in India? The first one is increase in the rate of inflation. Now we have discussed that whenever the rupee value depreciates, the imports into India becomes costly, and that is why it can lead to the imported inflation. The second one is decrease in the cost of external borrowings. Now when the rupee value depreciates, the example could be $1 was equal to 60. Now $1 is equal to rupees 70, which means earlier when you had borrowed $1, you had got rupees 60. Now to pay back the same $1, you would be required to pay 10 rupees more, that is rupees 70. So the cost of external borrowings would not decrease. Rather, the cost of external borrowings would increase whenever the rupee value depreciates. The next option is decrease in the current account deficit. So what do you think will happen to current account deficit? See, we have discussed that whenever the rupee value depreciates, imports in India become costly, whereas exports become competitive. But since our imports are much higher than our exports, the net impact will be there will be more outflow of dollars from the Indian economy. And since our imports are much higher than our exports, the current account in case of India, the deficit on this account will further increase rather than decreasing. So usually whenever the rupee value depreciate, the current account deficit would increase rather than decrease. So the third option is actually wrong. The fourth option is increase in export competitiveness, which as we discussed is correct. So the right answer should be 1 and 4 only. Now coming to the last prelims based question, the question is which among the following steps are not likely to be taken to counter the rupee depreciation? See, to counter the rupee depreciation, what we must do is we must enhance the overall dollar supply within the Indian economy. So as the dollar supply in the Indian economy increases, dollar value, which was earlier appreciating, this will reduce, and as the dollar value reduces, the rupee value will increase. So if you want to counter the rupee depreciation, we would have to increase the dollar supply. Now look at the options which are given here. Here it says decrease in the policy rates. Now imagine if RBI reduces the policy rates. Now what will happen in that particular case is the money supply or the rupee supply in the economy would increase. As the money supply or the rupee supply increases, this will lead to a further depreciation, because higher the supply, lower would be the value of the rupee. So obviously this option is ruled out. If you look at option 2 and option 3, if you enhance the FDI limit in various sectors, the dollar supply will increase. This is correct. If you restrict the capital outflows, once again, we would be able to prevent the outflow of dollar supply from the Indian economy, which is also a likely option taken to counter the rupee depreciation. And the next one is suck out dollars from the economy. So whenever the rupee value depreciate, rather than sucking out dollars, we need to inject the dollars into the economy. So this is not the likely step to be taken by the government or the RBI. So the right answer here is 1 and 4 only. The next article appears on page number 6 in the form of a lead article. The article is titled as Sealed Cover Jurisprudence is Appalling. Before discussing this particular article in detail, let us first look into the background. Recently, the Ministry for Information and Broadcasting refused to renew the license of the Media One TV channel, which is a Malayalam-based TV channel. Accordingly, the Media One then appealed before the High Court, that is the Kerala High Court, asking the Kerala High Court to give directions to the centre to renew its license. In response, the central government presented a sealed cover before the Kerala High Court, wherein in the sealed cover it highlighted that if you renew the license of the Media One TV channel, it could threaten the national security. So basically, it presented a sealed cover, and in the sealed cover, it highlighted as to how renewing the license of the Media One TV channel could threaten the national security. So rather than publicly acknowledging or highlighting the reasons as to why renewing the license of the Media One TV channel could threaten the national security, the central government decided to place its argument before the Kerala High Court in a form of a sealed cover. So based upon the information provided by the centre, the judges in the Kerala High Court decided to dismiss the appeal of the Media One. Accordingly, this particular article here highlights as to what are the various problems and challenges with respect to the sealed cover jurisprudence. So let us understand various aspects of the sealed cover jurisprudence, such as what is the meaning of sealed cover jurisprudence, when is it used, and what are its problems and challenges. All of you know the normal functioning of courts. During the normal functioning of courts, the judges hear the arguments and counter arguments. Based upon the arguments and counter arguments, the judges then take a decision. Apart from that, while delivering the verdict, the judges clearly highlight as to on what grounds or on what reasons they have taken a particular decision. So this is how a normal functioning of the courts takes place. But in case of the sealed cover jurisprudence, rather than hearing the arguments and counter arguments in an open platform, the court can ask for certain information in the sealed cover. So either the court can ask for information in the sealed cover, or the government itself may provide certain documents in the sealed cover. So when something is provided in a sealed cover before the courts, the information provided in these documents, it is available only to the judges who are hearing the cases. This kind of information is not available to the public, and this information is not even available to the accused who is a party to the particular case. So based upon the information which is provided in a sealed cover, the judges then take a decision. So this is the concept of the sealed cover jurisprudence. So in case of the normal functioning of the courts, the arguments and counter arguments are known to all the public. The judges take a decision, and while taking a decision, they'll clearly highlight as to what reasons they have taken a decision. But in case of sealed cover jurisprudence, the information is not provided in the open platform. The information is provided in a sealed document. The judges take a decision based upon the information provided in the sealed cover. Now, this sealed cover jurisprudence has been in existence since long time, but recently the sealed cover jurisprudence has increased. For example, recently the sealed cover jurisprudence was used especially with respect to certain important cases such as the Rafael deal, the Bhima Koregaon case, and the One Media case, in which the Ministry for Information and Broadcasting highlighted that if you renew the license to the One Media case, it would threaten the national security. So this it said openly, but how it would threaten the national security, that information was provided in the sealed cover. So this is the concept of the sealed cover jurisprudence. As far as the legal framework for the sealed cover jurisprudence is concerned, right now, we do not have any specific law which deals with the sealed cover jurisprudence. But if you look at the Rule 7, which has been formulated by the Supreme Court, the Rule 7 provides that certain documents which are considered to be confidential or secret, or certain documents which go against the public interest, such documents can be submitted before the court in the sealed cover. That is one aspect. Apart from that, Section 123 of the Indian Evidence Act also provides that certain unpublished official documents can also be presented in the sealed cover. So as you can guess here, the sealed cover jurisprudence is specifically used in certain cases which involve sensitive documents. For example, the sensitive documents related to the pricing of the Rafale fighter jets, the documents which could threaten the national security, the documents which are part of an ongoing investigation, or the documents which could breach the privacy of an individual. So these are some of the cases in which the courts can exercise the sealed cover jurisprudence. Now this particular article here has highlighted a number of problems and challenges with respect to the sealed cover jurisprudence. So let's understand these problems and challenges. First and foremost, the sealed cover jurisprudence violates the right to free trial. In a famous case known as the Gopala Krishnan versus State of Kerala, the Supreme Court had highlighted that the documents should be disclosed to the accused, so that once the accused go to the documents, based upon the information contained in these documents, the accused can defend himself or herself. So this is constitutionally mandated as highlighted by Supreme Court in the P. Gopala Krishnan versus State of Kerala. But what happens in case of sealed cover jurisprudence is the accused as such does not have any idea about the grounds on which he or she is punished. Now let's take the case of Media One. In case of Media One, the central government has highlighted that renewing the license could threaten the national security. But here the Media One itself does not know as to how the renewing of license could threaten the national security. On what grounds has the center reached such a conclusion? So unless the Media One does not know the grounds on which the central government believes that it could threaten the national security, Media One will not be able to put forth its argument. So that is why it is being said that it will violate the right to free trial. Secondly, it is also said that it violates the principles of natural justice. This is so because one aspect of the principles of natural justice is justice should not only be done, but it should also seem to be done. So in a sealed cover jurisprudence, justice may be done, but Problem is, justice may not be seen to be done. Next is, as highlighted before, in the normal functioning of the courts, when the judges deliver the verdicts, the judges clearly articulate the reasons for delivering the verdict, or they give elaborate reasons as to why they have decided in favor or against a particular case. But in case of sealed cover jurisprudence, the judges go through a sensitive document or they go through certain important information which is considered to be secret, and hence while writing the judgment they cannot clearly articulate as to on what grounds they have taken a particular decision. So that is why it is being said that sometimes it can enhance the scope of arbitrariness in the court decisions. Nextly, see, during the hearing of some cases, sensitive information may come up, and usually in order to ensure that such sensitive information is not leaked or say discussed in open platform, normally the courts carry out in-camera hearings. So when we already have in-camera hearings, in order to ensure that confidential or sensitive information is not revealed to the public, what is the need for the sealed cover jurisprudence? Now this is one of the arguments which has been put forth by some of the legal experts. And lastly, some of the legal experts have also pointed out that whenever the judges are taking a decision, the judges are taking a decision only based upon the information provided by the government without any kind of cross-questioning or cross-examining of the accused. So these are some of the problems and challenges as far as a sealed cover jurisprudence is concerned. Now, this particular article appears on page number 10. The article is titled as Labour Ministry Launches Donate a Pension Scheme. This article shall be important mainly with respect to prelims under the subsection of government schemes and policies. As we can see, in the previous year prelims, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various schemes and policies taken by the government for improving the financial inclusion in India. Accordingly, as far as your UPSC prelims examination is concerned, one should be aware about various schemes related to financial inclusion, such as the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, National Pension System, Atal Pension Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan Scheme, Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, Kisan Credit Card, and so on. So first we will understand the basic difference between the Atal Pension Yojana and the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan Scheme, and then we'll understand as to what is the new initiative which has been launched by the Labour Ministry with respect to the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan Scheme. Now, based upon our analysis of this particular article, you should be in a position to attempt these two prelims questions for practice. So now let's understand as to what are the important differences between the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan and the Atal Pension Yojana. See, both these two schemes seeks to provide for old age protection and social security benefits, especially for the workers employed in the unorganized sector. The Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan scheme was launched in the year 2019, whereas the Atal Pension Yojana was launched much earlier in the year 2015-16. As far as the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan scheme is concerned, it basically seeks to provide for pension for the people working in the unorganized sector. And here the criteria to join this particular scheme is that compulsorily a person must be employed in the unorganized sector. Such a person should be in the age group of 18 to 40 years, and such a person should earn less than rupees 15,000 per month. So you must understand here that the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan scheme is limited only to the unorganized workers, and that to be, if an unorganized worker wants to join this particular scheme, he has to be in the age group of 18 to 40 years, and such a person should earn less than rupees 15,000 per month. As far as Atal Pension Yojana is concerned, primarily this particular scheme focuses upon the unorganized workers. But here, any Indian citizen in the age group 18 to 40 can join the Atal Pension Yojana through their savings bank account or the post office savings bank account. So one important difference here between these two schemes is Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan is limited only to the unorganized workers who fulfill certain criteria. As far as the Atal Pension Yojana is concerned, even though it focuses on the unorganized worker, any Indian citizen in the age group of 18 to 40 can join the Atal Pension Yojana. So,
As far as the age of joining these two schemes is concerned, the age of a person should be between 18 to 40 years. Now let us understand as to how much of contribution has to be made in order to claim the benefits under the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan Yojana. So as you can see here, this is a table which clearly highlights as to how much contribution is required to be made. As I discussed earlier, a person can join the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan Yojana between the age of 18 to the age of 40. Now, depending upon his age of entry, that is depending upon in which particular age he is enrolling under this particular scheme, his monthly contribution to the scheme would be different. For example, if a person is joining the scheme at the age of 18, he will be required to make a monthly contribution of rupees 55. If he joins the scheme at the age of 20, he will be required to make a contribution of rupees 61. And as you can see, if a person is joining at the age of 40, he will be required to make a contribution of rupees 200. So as the age of entry into a particular scheme increases, his contribution also increases. And normally it ranges from rupees 55 to rupees 200. Now this is as far as the members' monthly contribution is concerned. An equivalent amount of money is contributed by the central government as well. So as far as the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan Yojana is concerned, 50% of the money is contributed by the subscriber and 50% of the money is contributed by the central government. So as you can see here, if a person is joining this particular scheme at the age of 18, he is making a monthly contribution of rupees 55. Central government is also making an equal contribution of rupees 55. So total monthly contribution to this particular scheme would be rupees 110. Now this person who is joining this particular scheme at the age of 18, he will be required to make this monthly contribution of rupees 55 until the age of 60. So until the age of 60, every month this particular person will be required to make a monthly contribution of rupees 55. The central government will also contribute an equivalent amount. Similarly, as you can see, for the person who is joining this particular scheme at the age of 40, this particular person will be required to make a monthly contribution of rupees 200 until the age of 60. So this person will be required to make a contribution for the next 20 years. So this person will contribute rupees 200. The central government will contribute an equivalent amount of rupees 200. So the monthly contribution to this particular scheme would be approximately around 400. So this is how basically the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan Yojana works. Now what happens is, upon the age of 60, a person will be entitled to get a minimum pension amount of rupees 3,000. So as discussed before, as far as the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan Yojana is concerned, 50% is contributed by the subscriber and the remaining 50% amount is contributed by the central government. How much amount is to be contributed? That basically ranges between rupees 55 to rupees 200. That in turn depends upon the age at which a person enrolls under this particular scheme. Upon attaining the age of 60 years, a person will start getting a minimum pension of rupees 3,000 per month. And please also understand that upon the death of the subscriber, 50% of the pension will be given to the spouse. So if a person is getting a minimum pension of rupees 3,000, upon the death of this particular person, the spouse will get minimum rupees 1,500 per month as a pension. And this particular scheme is presently implemented by the Ministry of Labour and Employment. Now, as far as the contribution to the Atal Pension Yojana is concerned, now, as I discussed before, under the Pradhan Mantri Sham Yogi Mandan, 50% of the amount is contributed by the central government. As far as the Atal Pension Yojana is concerned, government will make this contribution of 50% only in certain cases. The first case here is that this contribution will be made by the government only for a period of 5 years, that is between the years 2015-16 to 2019-20. So that is only for the first 5 years the government will contribute the 50%. So beyond 2019-20, the entire contribution would have to be paid by the subscriber. Government will not contribute anything. Second part here is the government will make this particular contribution only for those subscribers who are not income taxpayers or not covered under any of the existing schemes. Moreover, there is a limit also as to how much money the government will contribute. The government will not contribute more than rupees 1,000 per annum, that is per year. So, if you look at the basic difference, the second basic difference between the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan and Atal Pension Yojana is, under the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan, compulsory the government makes a contribution which is equivalent to the contribution made by the subscriber. So, there is 50% contribution by the subscriber and 50% contribution by the central government. As far as Atal Pension Yojana is concerned, the government made this 50% contribution only for the first 5 years. It was applicable only if a subscriber was not an income tax payer or not covered under any of the existing scheme. And moreover, there was a limit that the government will not contribute more than 1000 rupees per annum for the Atal Pension Yojana. So here, under the Atal Pension Yojana, as I discussed before, a person can join between the age of 18 to 40 years. So depending upon his age of entry and depending upon how much pension does he want to get, the contribution to this particular scheme will range between 42 to 1454. So here, under the Atal Pension Yojana, the minimum pension which a person can get ranges between rupees 1000 to rupees 5000. So depending upon how much pension a person wants to get, he is required to make a contribution of different amounts. Whereas under the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan, there is a uniform pension of rupees 3000. Nextly, upon the death of the subscriber, the spouse of the subscriber will get the same amount of pension which the subscriber used to get earlier. And this Atal Pension Yojana is presently implemented by the Ministry of Finance. So these are some important differences between the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan and the Atal Pension Yojana. Now this particular article highlights that the Ministry of Labour has launched the Donate a Pension scheme. So under this Donate a Pension scheme, whatever contribution is presently made by the unorganized worker under the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Mandan scheme, this contribution can in turn be made by any of the Indian citizen like you and me. So instead of the unorganized worker contributing, any of the Indian citizen can make the contribution on his or her behalf. So that is the concept of Donate a Pension scheme. The next article appears on page number 6. The article is titled as Working Women Too with a Child of the Good Child Care. Now this particular article highlights about the feminization of India's informal sector and what should be done in order to address this particular aspect. So let's first understand the concept of the feminization of the informal sector. See, presently 90% of the workers, they are employed as informal workers, and only 10% of the workers, they are considered to be the formal workers. Informal workers are basically those workers who do not have job security, income security, or access to social security benefits. So informal workers basically include the farmers, agriculture laborers, construction workers, then various categories of self-employed people such as the drivers, street vendors, domestic cooks, and so on. Now, if you see, 95% of the women in case of India, they find jobs as informal workers, and only 5% of the women, they find job in the formal sector. So when we say feminization of informal sector, it basically means that women find jobs more in the informal sector rather than in the formal sector. And as you can see, there are a number of reasons for the growing feminization of the informal sector. The problem with the feminization of informal sector is these women informal workers do not have job security, they are paid low wages, they do not have access to social security benefits, all of which leads to feminization of poverty in India. Apart from that, it leads to poor maternal and child health, and the women in the informal sector, they will not be able to avail various government benefits such as the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act 2017, because this particular Amendment Act as such is applicable only to the women employed in the organized or the formal sector. Accordingly, this particular article highlights various strategies which must be adopted in order to improve the status of the informal women workers. First and foremost, we need to strengthen the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. I hope all of you must be knowing that the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana seeks to provide an amount of rupees 5,000 to the pregnant and lactating mothers in order to compensate them for the wage loss for their pregnancy. Now there are a number of problems as far as this particular scheme is concerned. The first problem is right now this scheme covers only around 40% of the eligible population. So almost 60% of the eligible population are not covered under this particular scheme. Secondly, the amount of compensation which is paid, that is rupees 5,000, this compensation amount is too low to compensate for the wage loss. And third aspect is this compensation amount is applicable only for the first birth of a child. So if a particular woman is giving birth to a second child, then a woman will not be able to get benefits of the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. Accordingly, we need to address these problems related to the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana in order to provide various benefits to the women working as the informal workers. Other important strategies include strengthening the ICDS and efficient implementation of the National Creche Scheme. Now, the details of all of these strategies have been provided in the PDF for your reference. I'm very sure that you will be able to go through the PDF and understand things on your own. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now, let us have a look at the question for the day. The answer to the question that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option A. As far as the question for the day is concerned, the question is, which among the following factors can lead to the decline in the labor force participation rate in a country? The options are increase in enrollment in higher education. Second option is decrease in the number of people looking out for work. And the third option is increase in the number of informal workers.